Hello, third graders. I wanted to share more of Leprechauns Don't Play Basketball. We are going to be reading chapter 2 today. Before we get started in chapter 2, though, I wanted to review chapter 1 and what we know so far. We were introduced to Melody, Liza, Eddie, Mrs. Jeepers, and Carrie in the first chapter. We know that the setting of the story is at Bailey Elementary School on St. Patrick's Day. We know a few things about the characters already. I think Melody might be brave because she stands up to Eddie. We don't know much about Liza, just that she is Melody's friend. Eddie is mischievous because he pinched Melody and tried to pinch Carrie. Mrs. Jeepers may be a vampire. That's what the kids at Bailey Elementary School feel. They think that because she is from the Transylvanian Alps in Romania where Dracula lived. She has a strange accent, wears a bat bracelet and a giant brooch, which is a pin, with a green stone that matches her eyes. Eddie thinks that Carrie is the teacher's pet because she works in the classroom before school. It's always a good idea to do a summary of what you've read so far. So it's our previously in Leprechauns Don't Play Basketball. This gives us a check for understanding. So we can do the somebody wanted but so then model to summarize the story. Eddie's a third grade student at Bailey Elementary School. He is mischievous. I know this because he pinches Melody because he thinks she isn't wearing green on St. Patrick's Day. Eddie wanted to play tricks because it was St. Patrick's Day. He tried to pinch Carrie, but Eddie was stopped by his teacher, Mrs. Jeepers. The class thinks she is a vampire. So Eddie says it is just for fun, and Carrie thinks leprechauns are neat. But Mrs. Jeepers gets upset about the idea of leprechauns, and Eddie wonders why she doesn't like them. So let's think about chapter 2. The title of chapter 2 is Eddie Cuts Loose, and I know that phrase cuts loose means get crazy and act wild. And since he is a little mischievous, I wonder what he will do. Chapter 2, Eddie Cuts Loose. Eddie slammed his math book shut and looked around the third grade classroom. Kids were bending over their books like they were performing heart surgery. He'd been working hard all morning, too. As a matter of fact, he'd been working hard ever since Mrs. Jeepers came to Bailey Elementary. Eddie scratched his curly red hair and watched the second hand of the clock sweep around. He tapped his pencil as each second passed. Shh, Howie hissed. Oop, there was another character. Eddie stuck out his tongue at the freckled face of his best friend, but he did stop tapping his pencil when Mrs. Jeepers flashed her eyes in his direction. Eddie felt around inside his desk for something to do. He dug through wrinkled scraps of paper stuck to old bubblegum wads, pencils without erasers, a pile of dry glue, broken crayons, dried up markers, old test papers with F's, Howie's missing baseball card, and a pair of scissors. Eddie hooked his fingers into the scissors. He snipped a few of the F's off his old test papers and stuck them to a wad of bubblegum. It was then that he noticed how one long strand of Liza's hair had fallen out of her ponytail. The long clump was dangling right on Eddie's desk. I'm looking at the picture and I see that mischievous look on his face, thinking all about the things in his desk too, like old bubblegum wads and Howie's missing baseball card. You would think that he would give it back to Howie if he really was his friend. It does sound like he's kind of mischievous. Eddie glanced up at Mrs. Jeepers. Luckily, she was busy helping Carrie. He grinned wickedly and inched the scissors across his desk. Very slowly, he surrounded the hair with the sharp metal scissors. One snip, and the deed would be done. Eddie squeezed like he was pulling the trigger of a gun. Something was wrong. The scissors wouldn't close. Eddie squeezed harder, but it was like they were frozen. It was then that he saw a green flash in the front of the room. Eddie gulped as Mrs. Jeepers rubbed the green brooch at her neck and smiled her odd little half smile. "Oh, caught again," Eddie thought to himself as he put away his scissors. He never could have any fun in Mrs. Jeepers' room. But it was almost time for gym. Gym was the one time he could really cut loose. All that basketball dribbling must have turned Coach Ellison's brains to mashed potatoes because he never knew what was going on. Finally, Mrs. Jeepers stood up from her desk. "It is time for physical education," she said in her strange Romanian accent. "Please line up." Every time Mrs. Jeepers spoke, Eddie got goosebumps. Her accent reminded him of a Dracula movie he'd seen. Eddie joined the rest of the class in line. As soon as his teacher turned away, he pinched Liza's chubby arm. "Ow!" Liza screeched. She slapped her hand over her mouth just as Mrs. Jeepers turned around. "Is there something the matter?" Mrs. Jeepers asked Liza. No, ma'am," Liza stuttered. Eddie snickered as they walked down the hall. "Scaredy cat," he whispered to Liza. Liza did her best to ignore Eddie. Everybody did their best to ignore him. But Eddie was itching for some excitement. By the time the class had reached the bathrooms, he had managed to pinch 3 people, trip 2, and kick another. I'm noticing a pattern of behavior for Eddie. But that wasn't enough for Eddie. Unfortunately for Howie, the girls' bathroom door was propped open. Eddie acted fast before he missed his chance. He grabbed Howie and pushed him into the girls' bathroom. The girls giggled as Howie stumbled out. "What's wrong with you?" Howie whispered. "Are you trying to get in trouble?" "No," Eddie admitted slyly. "I just want to have a little St. Patrick's Day fun." "You better watch out or Mrs. Jeepers will turn you into bat bait," Howie warned. "Then you'll be sorry." Eddie's face grew pale. One time, he made Mrs. Jeepers so mad that she dragged him out in the hall. The way her green eyes flashed and the warning she hissed had made the blood drain from his face. He never admitted to anyone what had happened in the hall, but the thought of it was enough to keep him quiet, at least until he got to the gym. And that is the end of chapter 2. So we have a new character in this chapter, Howie, who is Eddie's best friend, even though Eddie pushes him into the girls' bathroom. We notice some more behaviors with Eddie and how he is mischievous and just a troublemaker. So I wonder what that will bring in the rest of the chapter.